Our presenters today are Jenny Hobson from Partners for Rural Impact. She provides technical assistance to schools in Kentucky, Appalachia through her work at Partners for Rural Impact. She partners with principals and teams working on their family-friendly schools certification. She's been a classroom teacher, family engagement worker, and training coordinator. We also have Sabrina. I feel like I was missing. Sabrina, say your last name for me.
McElroy.
McElroy. Okay. She is a federal programs coordinator for Breathitt County Schools. She has over 30 years experience as a teacher and administrator in Breathitt County. She is currently the federal programs coordinator. In this position, she assists teacher and staff with strategic strategies for maximization of resources and planning. So I'm going to hand it over to, I think, Jenny first. Is that correct?
Yeah, welcome everybody. And I think since we're a small group, if at any point you want to unmute and ask or say anything, feel free. Now that I'm sharing screen, which I'm assuming you can all see, I can't really see you very well. So, but Brooke and Sabrina will be on the lookout for you. So let's get into it.
So I am Sabrina McElroy. I have now 31 years of experience after this year. Also, along with the federal programs coordinator, I'm parent liaison, homeless coordinator, and any other role to support my people in my district that I need to be. My passion for our students, family, and staff and community make my job a delight every day. I love getting up, coming to my job, and working with their families. As you'll notice, I'm very passionate about my job, and I love to see those people around me, family, staff, community members, co-workers flourish. So that really gives me enjoyment in my job when I can help those people do great in what they're doing every day to educate our kids. So my contact information is on this slide. So if at any time you want to reach out to me to talk to me a little bit more about anything we talk about, I'm always open. I'll help anybody because it's all of our kids, not just Breathitt County kids that we want to be impacted, and families everywhere that we want to be impacted.
Amen. And here's my contact information as well. You have these slides in the grid, so please feel free to download those and click on any links. I'm a social worker and an educator, and the thing that really applies to this training today or this session today is that in one of my previous roles, I was a social media manager and communications person for an elementary school here in Kentucky. So we're going to talk about communicating with families today, two-way communication. These things on the slide are all things that you already know that students do better when their families are engaged. But we now also have this 35+ year research basis that confirms what we already knew in our guts. So I want to recommend a book to you. It's called Everyone Wins by Karen Mapp and Ann Henderson. It just came out this fall. It distills all of the research, and Brooke's holding it up. It distills all of the research into very user-friendly pieces, and you can draw on those if you're wanting to justify the use of funds for family engagement work. It has short sections of narrative, but then at the end it has a page for something like 35 studies. It tells you what the design was. It tells you anything that you would need to justify why something that you want to use is evidence-based. So now I will turn it back over to Sabrina to talk a little bit about communicating with families.
So a little bit with my history. I was an elementary principal, and I like to tell this story because I'm sure I am not alone when I say I was at a small rural elementary school. We had about 250 kids, small staff. I really thought that we had the communication and that partnership with parents down pat. So when I was lucky enough to be introduced to Miss Grace and Miss Jenny and Miss Brooke, and I started really looking at those resources, I was like, oh, wait a minute, I probably didn't do this too well. And then I started thinking, I'm always one, I look ahead. So I don't look in the moment, I look at long term, because we know we have to chunk that out in short terms to get where we want to be. So when I started thinking long term, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I have failed my families, my kids, my teachers when I was at Highland Turner as a principal. So how can I make that better? So when I was introduced to these great ladies, we did some work around the family engagement, and their website is awesome. So we want to make sure everybody also knows about that, and resources that we have to help with the family engagement and becoming a true partnership with families, instead of just saying, okay, I communicate, I put it on Facebook, I do an all call, I send out emails, but do I really ask for anything back from my families in return? And honestly, I didn't do that well with that. Other than people that I saw in the pickup line or out in the community, but I didn't really make that a strong focus. So now I know how important that is. So making sure that we build communication around our core beliefs. So some of the core beliefs that I have, and that has been researched out to making parents actually really be engaged in the process, are all families have dreams for their children. No matter where those kids come from, no matter where those parents come from, they actually want their kid to do well. And a lot of times people are like, well, they just don't have a chance because look where they came from. But no matter how little those families have or how much, all families have dreams for their children to do better. And every family has something to bring to the table. Sometimes it's easier to find what that is than others. But if you keep building that relationship, you will find what that is that they can bring to the table to help not only their family, but your school and your other families. So keep in mind that all families have dreams for their children. All families have the capacity to support their child's learning. Now, some of those families take a little bit more support. So really, we have to figure out, as building admin and our teachers, how we can sustain those partnerships, how we can cultivate those partnerships between school and home, and how we can offer ways to really help those families be able to support their students more. That may be some training in math, Eureka Math. I can't do it myself, so I train myself often when anybody needs help with that. So how can we support our families? So always keep an open mind around that. Also, families and school staff are equal partners. That was always a core belief of mine, but I guess I wasn't really sure how to make that happen. So setting priorities to make sure that we communicate with our families and make sure that our families and school staff are equal partners as our students move forward, as our community moves forward. And then finally, being a school leader, really that primarily rests on you for being the responsibility to cultivate that and sustain those partnerships. You can build those, but if we don't progress monitor those relationships, if we don't progress monitor those conversations, and we don't buy into that and believe that ourselves, that's probably going to fall by the wayside. So those are just some core beliefs that I have, along with also some research behind those. And if I didn't put the book on here, but those talk a lot about those in a book called Powerful Partnerships. So if you don't have this book, that's also a great book to start with. It really talks about how to engage your families and students so that your students grow. And that's really what we want.
So we're going to get into a little bit of the nitty gritty of communication, particularly with families, and how to make that work. And I'm going to talk a bit about the work of Todd Rogers. He is a behavioral scientist who spent the last decade or so really digging into the tiny minutia and ins and outs of effective communication with families, especially around attendance. And what he has found has turned a lot of what I previously thought to be true around. I know that we have all had the experience where we think, I want to send out a message that has all of the information anybody could need and answer all of the possible questions they could have so they know what to do and there's no questions. So what Todd Rogers has very clearly found is that the longer a message is, the less likely that the parent will read it or open it at all. So short is better than complete. Messages should be as short as possible. We're really talking about the length of a text message. Like everybody else, parents are bombarded with messages and information all day long from all kinds of sources. So a short message that has a link to more information for people who have time to dive deep, that's the key to getting people to open those messages. Next, your messages should be predictable, meaning families know when to expect to see that message. You know this from school closure, right? If my phone dings at 5:30 in the morning in February, I am 99% sure that what that means is my kid's not going to school today. So think about how you can make lots of different kinds of messages predictable in that same way. Like send out your monthly calendar at the same time, on the same day of the month, every month. So that lightens cognitive load for your families. It earns their goodwill because when they get used to these predictable messages, they stop feeling like, excuse me, oh, I'm getting a call from that school all the time. So predictable just makes it part of their routine, and it makes them more likely to open that message. And then finally, Todd Rogers says messages should give the parents something to do. They're more likely to retain the information if they have something to do with it. This makes sense to educators, right? Because we know that kids haven't mastered material until they can actually do something with it. Same for all of us. But the actions in your messages don't have to be real complicated. It can just be something like log into the parent portal today and check grades. Ask your student about the dangers of vaping assembly we had today. Tell your student to check the lost and found. It's just some very simple action they can take. So short messages, predictable messages, and actionable. And Sabrina's going to talk a little bit about the nitty-gritty of communication planning.
So how do we make that work? What Jenny just said. How do we as a principal, we have everything on our desk. How do we make that work? I, as an elementary principal, I'm big on communicating with my parents. I like them to know what's coming. I like them to know what to expect. I didn't like any hidden anything. So I could be blasted on Facebook for not letting them know. You know, I say that and laugh, but we all know that's what happens. So really, when I began my journey as principal, I thought my administrator, I taught middle school for 16 years. So I always thought about what did I not like? Loved my administrator, loved my principal, but I thought, what are things that he does that I really don't like as a teacher? And that I've heard the other teachers talk about that they don't like. Because I thought, well, I don't want to be that person. I want to change those things so that I don't go down the same path of things that I know I hated as a teacher under this administrator. And he did a great job of communicating, but it was a very long, once a week paper that we ran off on the ditto copier, and it went home with parents. And I'm sure most of those got thrown in the trash before they ever went out the door. We're talking about middle school kids, 7th, 8th grade. They're not going to take that stuff home. So really, how do we make sure that communication is a top priority when we have so many things on our plate? As principal, I would set time each week for planning my communication with family. I did that on Friday afternoon because this is what all happened through the week, and then I know what's upcoming. So every time, and I told my secretary, don't bother me. This is my 30 minutes on Friday. That's a non-negotiable time. And I set that up just on what I wanted to plan communication for my families for the next week. Also, I made sure that I prioritize my activities. And I asked for feedback from my staff, my family's community members to help guide that communication. Because I said, if you don't like my email, tell me how to communicate with you. I don't have to just communicate through email. I can send a text, an email, whatever. I had different lists of parents that liked me to communicate different ways. Some of them were like, I'm fine, you talking to me on the drop-off line every morning. Hey, whatever works for you. And the fourth bullet was something I didn't do often, but I do that now with all my schools in the district because I know how important that is. We meet regularly with our parent and community groups to build that safe relationship for our people to be open to the communication that we're giving them. So I want to say that again, because that's a real, I've always said that if we can get our parents and community on board with our schools and our teachers and our admin, then our kids are going to soar. So make it a priority to meet regularly with your parent and community groups. And that can be at the same time. And I'll tell you kind of a little bit more how I make that work to build that safe relationship for that strong two-way communication for true partnerships with families and the community. So every month I meet with all of our schools. We have 3 elementary and a middle and high. So every month I meet for an hour with a group of people. Now, some schools do a little better job of setting that up on who they include. I have one school and we have now we're up to 25 people that meet. We have community members. We have our local people that do our social emotional for the district that meets with us. We have a local pastor that wanted to be a part of it. We have our Unite lady, because we all know that vaping is terrible right now in our district. I've now got on board our DPP, which actually does attendance. So she and we just sat down this week and we have this plan that every month we're going to have a meeting and we're going to have focus points, and anybody that wants to come can come. We're going to do them in the daytime for those parents that want to come to the schools in the day. And then we're going to do a community one district wide, one time a month for anybody in the district that wants to come at that one. And we're going to provide them, talking about federal program stands. We have money we can spend on parental engagement. And to be honest with you, as a principal, it was hard for me to determine really what I could spend that on or wanted to spend that on. So now in my role, I can help those principals say, you know, yeah, we can buy all the manipulatives we want and we can send those home. But if we don't provide any services around how to help our families use them, what standards they're with, if they're not grade level appropriate, we're wasting our money and our time. So we actually have our first meeting scheduled with our schools that will start in February, and we will travel. And one of the things that we're going to do, just as icebreakers for our people, because often they feel like, oh, she's got a degree, she's smarter than me. I'm afraid to ask questions. I don't want to look stupid. So we're going to do a little icebreaker, kind of like a little human scavenger hunt with some people in their building. So those people can get a little more to know their principals, their guidance counselors, their youth service center, all of those people that play a key role in their teachers. So we're going to do a little human scavenger hunt with some QR codes. And then we're going to give some prizes on who gets the most of those. So we're going to do some little fun things like that in our meeting. Now, sometimes those meetings will last longer than an hour. If they're okay with that, I'm fine with it, but I do value their time. So at the beginning, I say, here's the allotted time we have. Here are what we want to get finished today. And then what we do after that point is going to be led by you all. I'm here as long as you need me. Some of our meetings at school will go from 45 minutes to an hour and 15, depending on the topic. It's just a great way to get more of our people in the building. So as you are building those groups, I'm going to give you a little hint. Think outside the box. We all know in schools we have that handful of people that no matter what we're doing, we can count on. I can call Susie Bell down the street and she'll be here in 5 minutes and help me with whatever I want. I can call Jake, he can be here, he'll help me with whatever. But if those parents are already that engaged, are those the only parents we need to be talking to? So we really want to think outside the box. Most of our schools now have kids that are truant, their families, their moms, parents, grandparents, whoever are coming. We've chosen some kids at the high school level that had some behavior incidences, and we've actually put those kids on our group there because we want to look at all options through all different lenses as we build our community groups and build those safe relationships for communication. So my success story, and I like to tell this, I have a family. She's a single mom, has 2 kids. When I was at Holland Turner as principal, her kid was truant every year. When he did come in, he was always late. So I transitioned roles before we actually started the family engagement pathway. But I knew those families, so I kind of helped them build their team because I knew them and I knew some of the people that if I were still there, I would focus on. So since she's been coming to our meetings, I buy her little things like a planner. All of us girls love her colored pens, right? She gets colored pens. I buy her little doodads that I see that I think she'll like because I'm building that relationship with her because we want our kid to come to school and do well. So that kid, I just checked his attendance actually before the meeting. He has only missed 3 days this year and they all had a doctor's excuse. He's only been tardy 2 days. So that's a win in my, just in my eyes, just because I put her on that group and I listen to what she says. So just think about how you can build those groups and who you can bring to the table to really build that strong partnership and help you guide that communication with your families, because our community members know what they need. Our parents know what they need. We have their kids most of the day. So if we know that, then we can meet the needs of our kids.
And Sabrina and I have talked about that student a lot. And I think also he showed, when he started coming to the building, he showed huge growth in his math. So that's no surprise to us.
They're getting ready to take MAP again. They start on the 23rd. So as soon I actually checked their schedule and he's taking his on the 24th. That's when they start. So I will have good news, I'm sure, to talk about that kid again at the end of the week. So
a couple more tech tips. One, use the scheduling options in your message platform, whether you use OneCall or School Messenger or IC or whatever you use. All of them have a way to schedule messages in advance so you don't have to be on all the time. If you don't know how to use the scheduler in your app, send me a message. I'll hop on a quick Zoom and we'll figure it out together. Talking Points is a free app for teachers. It translates communications into a huge number of home languages. So if you have families that you have been unable to reach because no one in your district speaks the home language, Talking Points. The other great thing about Talking Points is that it will let the family then compose a response in the home language, and then Talking Points translates that back into your language so that now you've got two-way communication with a family that you might not have been able to have any communication with. Don't rely only on social media. We know that's where we get the most traction. We know that's where we get blown up. We know that's where, you get the most responses, but don't rely only on that. Partly because young parents, and parents are getting younger every year, are moving away from the Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and a lot of the social media that they may be on. Well, we may not want to put out a TikTok about cafeteria prices going up. So don't rely only on social media. And there's some pretty good national data that indicates that even though families interact with the social media, they really prefer to get a text, an email, a call to get their information. And I want to make sure that I mention delegating where you can with your communication, because your jobs as school leaders are 24/7, 365. Are there ways that you can reasonably delegate so you don't have to hold it all? Maybe you want to make one of your committees responsible for sending out certain kinds of emails every month. If your district gives you the leeway to appoint a social media manager and you have a really trusted partner in your building that you'd feel good about entrusting that to, that can just save you so much time, because you are really needed to put out all the fires that are getting lit every day. So we're going to talk a little bit too about how to support teachers as they communicate, because the reality is that schools and districts and principals can communicate as much as they want. Families trust the teachers. So I'll turn it over to Sabrina.
So just really think about how you communicate with your staff, because how you can communicate with your staff is probably how those staff are going to communicate with families. So really think about using multiple ways to communicate with staff so that you can model what effective communication looks like. Because we always, well, as principals, we say we want feedback from teachers. Sometimes we get it and then we're like, well, what in the world? I don't do that. But then we really have to take a deeper dive and look and say, well, maybe I do that. So maybe look at how you communicate and really model with your staff on what effective communication looks like. One thing that I find really easy to do is provide resources such as conversation starters for your teachers to use. That's pre-filled out, because if they're not really sure about it to start with, especially new people, that will give them a guide on what to say and what maybe not to say. And then allow time in your daily master schedule to prioritize communication, and actually take a little bit of time to train your staff on how to talk to families. I always look at my role as being great customer service. So how do you, when you go into Starbucks, the grocery store, restaurant, how do you want to be talked to? How do you want your customer service to look like? So make sure that when we are communicating, that we are training our staff on how to do that with families.
And so I'll just add a couple of things as you work with new teachers. And I really want to emphasize new teachers, and there's exciting work that's going on in the state of Kentucky right now through a grant that the Pritchard Committee has got to work on training pre-service teachers and working with families. Because new teachers, and we all remember this, you come in and you're scared to death of families, especially if you're young. I was very young. All these parents were older than me. I didn't have any kids. I was scared of them. So we're working on some new programs for training teachers, but what you can do as a stopgap, since they don't really get any training or much training in their pre-service work in working with families, is to provide mentorship for those new teachers and to provide time for them. And then finally, this has not been our topic today, but if you like what you heard today, if you're already doing some of these things, your school may qualify for family-friendly school certification, which is a statewide honor. We had 32 schools in Frankfort in November in the Rotunda, honoring them. And we'd love to have any school join us. Sabrina supports schools in Breathitt County. I support schools in Eastern Kentucky. Brooke supports schools all over the state. If you're interested, click on the links, contact us, and we'll get you hooked up with some technical support from someone. So you have those links in the grid.